There's a part of all of us that wants to belong, to be part of the group, to feel safe. But here's the thing. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone, and that's never easy. Humans are wired for connection, which makes standing alone feel risky. From the time we're born, we're hardwired to seek belonging. It's not just a nice to have, it's a basic human need. For our ancestors, being part of a group wasn't about comfort, it was survival. If you were left outside the group, you didn't last long. And while the world has changed, our brains haven't evolved as quickly. That primal wiring still runs deep. When we feel excluded or when we risk standing apart, our nervous system treats it like a life or death situation. Neuroscience research shows that social rejection triggers the same part of the brain that registers physical pain. That's why the feeling of being left out, ignored, or isolated isn't just emotionally hard, it hurts. This is also why standing alone can feel so risky, even when you know it's the right thing to do. It's not just in your head, your body is having a real biological response to the idea of being separated from the group. And let's be honest, belonging feels good. Walking into a room where people welcome you, where you feel seen and accepted, is one of the most powerful experiences we can have. But here's where it gets tricky. If belonging requires us to silence our truth, it's not really belonging. It's fitting in. And fitting in is the opposite of true connection because it asks us to hide the parts of ourselves that might challenge or disrupt the group. I've heard people say, I'd rather stay quiet than rock the boat. And I understand that instinct. But every time we choose silence over truth, we chip away at our own sense of self. And the irony is, the people we're trying so hard to fit in with, they're probably carrying the same fears. The need to belong is universal, but so is the tension of wanting to be true to yourself. What I've learned is this: the need for connection is real, but so is the need for authenticity. And the moments when those two things are in conflict, that's where courage comes in. Courage is being willing to stand alone, even when your whole body is telling you it's safer to blend in. Because if belonging costs you your voice, it's not belonging, it's betrayal. And nothing will erode your self-trust faster than betraying who you are just to be accepted. So yes, humans are wired for connection, but you were never meant to lose yourself in the process. The cost of betraying yourself is higher than the discomfort of standing alone. I think most of us have been in that moment where we feel the pull, speak up or stay quiet, be honest or go along. And in those moments, it can feel like silence is the safer option. It's easier in the short term to avoid the awkwardness, the tension, or the fear of being judged. But here's what I know for sure. Every time we betray what we know to be true just to avoid discomfort, there's a price. And that price is always higher than we realize in the moment. Research on moral courage tells us that people who stand up for their beliefs, especially in difficult situations, often experience immediate stress. It feels hard because it is hard. But over time, those same people report higher levels of self-respect, emotional resilience, and a stronger sense of integrity. On the flip side, the people who consistently silence themselves to avoid conflict don't walk away unscathed. What they gain in temporary ease, they lose in long-term self-trust. And once you start chipping away at your self-trust, it's hard to stop. I once had a conversation with someone who told me, I don't even recognize myself anymore. I've spent so much time making sure everyone else is comfortable that I've forgotten how to be honest about what I want and believe. That's the slow erosion that happens when we make a habit of betraying ourselves. And here's the truth. The discomfort of standing alone is real, but it's temporary. The pain of abandoning yourself, that lingers. And let's be clear, this isn't about being confrontational for the sake of it. It's about living in a way that aligns with your values. There will be moments when speaking up is uncomfortable. You might lose approval, you might lose relationships. But the question is, are you willing to lose yourself just to hold on to those things? Because the world doesn't need more people who blend in at the expense of their truth. It needs people who are willing to stand in their integrity Even when it's hard, even when they stand alone, courage shows up in small, everyday moments. When we think about courage, it's easy to picture the big dramatic moments, whistleblowers exposing corruption, people marching for justice, someone standing up to a crowd, and yes, those moments matter. But the truth is, courage usually shows up in the small, everyday decisions that no one else sees. It's choosing to have the hard conversation instead of avoiding it. It's saying no when every part of you wants to say yes just to keep the peace. It's holding a boundary when it would be easier and more comfortable to let it slide. And these moments, they add up. Research on behavioral integrity tells us that when our actions align with our values, we experience greater psychological well-being and stronger self-respect. But the reverse is also true. When we consistently abandon what we know to be right, even in small ways, it chips away at our sense of self. Most of us aren't undone by one major decision. It's the accumulation of small compromises that erodes our integrity over time. I've had people tell me, I'll speak up when it really matters, as if courage is something we can just summon on demand, but it doesn't work like that. Courage is a practice. If we're unwilling to be brave in the small moments, when the stakes feel low, we're not going to suddenly find that bravery when everything is on the line. And the truth is, those small moments do matter. They're the ones that shape who we are and how we show up in the world. And here's the other thing. Courage isn't always loud. It's not always a big speech or a bold declaration. Sometimes it's as quiet as saying, I disagree, or I'm not okay with this. And sometimes it's choosing not to go along with something, whether anyone else notices or not. It doesn't have to be public to be powerful. If you wait for the big moment to be courageous, you'll miss the hundreds of small chances to practice it every day. And every time you choose to align your actions with your values, even when it's uncomfortable, you're building the muscle you'll need for those bigger moments. Because courage isn't something you either have or don't have. It's something you choose over and over again. When one person speaks up, others are more likely to follow. There's something powerful that happens when one person is willing to break the silence. It doesn't matter if it's a meeting, a family dinner, or a classroom. When someone is brave enough to say, this doesn't feel right, or I see this differently, it shifts the energy in the room. You can almost feel it. The silence breaks, and suddenly others who were holding back feel like they have permission to speak to. Social psychologists call this the bystander effect. It's the idea that the more people who are present, the less likely anyone is to act. Not because people don't care, but because everyone assumes someone else will step in. But there's another side to that research. When one person has the courage to take action, it dramatically increases the likelihood that others will do the same. That first voice gives others a sense of safety. It says, you're not alone. I've had conversations with people who assume that if no one else is speaking up, maybe it's not a big deal. But here's what I've learned. Silence is rarely about agreement. More often, it's about fear. People stay quiet because they don't want to be judged or because they're waiting for someone else to go first. And if you're thinking, why does it have to be me? Trust me, you're not the only one. Everyone else is asking the same question. The truth is, courage is contagious. I've seen it again and again. When one person takes a stand, it gives others the courage to do the same. And it doesn't always take a speech or a big gesture. Sometimes it's a simple question. Are we sure this is the right thing? Or has anyone considered another perspective? That small act of bravery can open the door for others to step forward. And here's the thing. When you're the first to speak up, it might feel like you're standing alone, but you're rarely as alone as you think. There are almost always others who are thinking the same thing, but don't know how to say it. Your voice can be the one that breaks through the hesitation and makes space for other voices to join. And once that happens, everything starts to change. The fear of judgment drives social conformity. If you've ever held back from sharing your opinion or going against the crowd, you're not alone. That fear of judgment, the worry that people will think less of us if we stand out or speak up, is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. It's not just a personality quirk, it's biological. Our brains are wired to seek social acceptance because, for most of human history, being part of the group meant survival. Being cast out didn't just feel bad, it was life-threatening. That ancient wiring still influences us today, even when the stakes are much lower. Research shows that people are more likely to conform to group opinions even when they know those opinions are wrong. Classic social psychology experiments like Solomon Ash's conformity studies reveal how deeply this need to belong runs. Participants were shown a simple visual task where the correct answer was obvious. But when actors in the group gave the wrong answer, most participants followed along despite knowing it was incorrect. And here's the key. They didn't change their behavior because they were unsure. They conformed because they didn't want to stand out. I think most of us can relate to that. It's tempting to believe we're independent thinkers, but when the pressure is on, when we risk being criticized or excluded, it can feel easier to stay quiet. There's a voice in the back of our minds that says, don't make it harder than it has to be, just go along. But here's the truth. Belonging that requires you to betray your values isn't belonging, it's fitting in. And fitting in comes at a cost. What I've learned is that judgment is unavoidable. No matter how carefully you try to navigate the world, there will always be people who misunderstand, criticize, or reject you. But when you trade your authenticity for approval, you pay with pieces of yourself. And the people who matter, the ones who value you for who you are, won't ask you to conform to be accepted. They'll respect your willingness to show up fully, even when it means standing apart. If the fear of judgment is driving your choices, it's worth asking yourself, whose approval am I chasing? And am I willing to lose myself to get it? Being true to yourself means accepting that not everyone will understand or agree with you. One of the hardest truths to accept is that when you choose to live authentically, when you stop filtering yourself to meet other people's expectations, some people won't understand and some won't agree. It's uncomfortable because most of us want to be liked. We want to feel seen and accepted. That's human. But if you shape your identity around the approval of others, you give away your power. You lose the ability to decide who you are because you've outsourced it to the opinions of people who may never truly know you. And here's the thing, disagreement isn't always rejection. Sometimes people push back because your willingness to be real confronts their fear of doing the same. I've learned that when you live in a way that honors your values, it can be unsettling for those who aren't ready to face their own. Your courage might make other people uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're living in a way that's honest. There's a myth that says if you're doing the right thing, if you're being authentic, the people around you will cheer you on. But the truth is, living authentically often means disrupting the status quo. You may lose relationships, you may be misunderstood, but the alternative is abandoning yourself, and that's a price no amount of approval is worth paying. So what I've seen time and again is that the people who truly care about you, who love you for who you are, not who they want you to be, will respect your honesty even when they don't agree. And the people who demand that you shrink or change to be worthy of their acceptance, those relationships are built on conditions, not connection. When you stop trying to make everyone else comfortable, you create space for the relationships that are real. And while you may not be understood by everyone, the freedom of being fully yourself is always worth it. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act despite it. A lot of people think that being courageous means not being afraid, but that's not how it works. Courage and fear are not opposites, they exist side by side. Every act of real courage I've ever seen or experienced has fear sitting right next to it. The difference is that courageous people don't let fear drive their decisions. They feel the fear, acknowledge it, and still choose to move forward. Neuroscience tells us that fear is an automatic response. It's designed to protect us. When we sense a threat, whether it's physical danger or the emotional risk of being judged, our brain reacts the same way. It triggers that fight, flight, or freeze response. And while that's helpful if we're facing real danger, it's not always helpful when the threat is simply being vulnerable or speaking up The brain can't distinguish between a lion chasing you and the risk of saying something unpopular in a meeting. Fear shows up either way. But here's the truth. Fear isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. Often it's a sign that you're doing something that matters. And the people who consistently choose courage aren't immune to fear. They've just learned how to work with it. They don't wait for the fear to disappear before they act, because if they did, they'd never take that first step. What I've learned is that the most courageous people aren't fearless. They're willing to be afraid and do it anyway. And the more you practice facing fear, the more resilient you become. Each time you choose courage, you teach yourself that you can handle discomfort, that you can survive uncertainty, and that your values matter more than your fear. So the next time fear shows up, and it will, don't wait for it to go away. Instead, ask yourself, what's more important, my fear or my integrity? Because the moments that define us are almost always the ones where we choose to be brave, even when every part of us wants to back down. Standing alone isn't about being against others. It's about being for yourself. When you choose to stand alone, it's easy for people to misinterpret your intentions. They might assume you're being difficult, rebellious, or even judgmental. But standing alone isn't about pushing against everyone else. It's about standing for who you are and what you believe. There's a huge difference between being combative and being clear. And clarity, knowing what matters to you and being willing to live by it, is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect. I've heard people say, I don't want to cause trouble, as if speaking their truth is inherently disruptive. But the reality is, when you betray yourself to keep the peace, the cost isn't external, it's internal. You start to lose trust in your own voice. And over time, that silence doesn't protect you, it diminishes you. Being for yourself means having the courage to say, this is who I am, this is what I believe. And even if no one else stands with me, I'm not going to abandon myself. It's not about needing to be right all the time. It's about being grounded in your values, even when it's uncomfortable. And here's the thing, when you're clear about who you are, you can engage with others without feeling threatened. You don't have to convince everyone to agree with you, because your worth isn't tied to their approval. You can listen openly, hold space for different perspectives, and still honor your truth. What I've learned is that the people who are most rooted in their values are also the ones who are the most compassionate. Because when you're secure in yourself, you don't need to tear others down. You can stand firm without building walls. And when you live from that place, when you choose to be for yourself, you create the kind of life where integrity isn't just something you talk about. It's something you live. At the end of the day, standing alone is never really about isolation. It's about integrity. It's about the willingness to live in a way that reflects who you are, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, and even when no one else understands. Because the truth is, if you abandon yourself to fit in, no amount of approval will ever fill the space where your authenticity belongs. Choosing to stand alone doesn't mean you don't value connection. In fact, it's the opposite. The strongest, most meaningful relationships are built when you show up fully, without pretending, without shrinking. And the people who deserve a place in your life will respect you for it. They may not always agree with you, but they will value your honesty and your courage. And the best part, when you stand in your truth, you give others permission to do the same. You won't always get it right. There will be times when you feel the weight of that choice, when the easier path would be to stay quiet, go along, or disappear into the crowd. But those moments are where courage lives. Not in the absence of fear, but in the decision to choose yourself, even when it's hard. So when you face that choice, when the world asks you to trade your truth for comfort, I hope you remember this. You are worthy of being seen exactly as you are. Your voice matters, your values matter, and no one else can decide who you are. That's your job.